All right, David, thanks for being here. I know you're in the fabulous Las Vegas. How's it going tonight?
I am great, fantastic. Couldn't be happier. Love living here, and love the long hot days of summer to get my sweat on.
For sure. And I don't blame you, man. And just and what little I know about you though, speaking of getting your sweat on, I know you're an athlete, a public speaker, entrepreneur, and also an author. And you have what, your second book, Cycle of Lives, coming out, or if it's already out?
It came out
Okay.
not too long ago, and yeah, I've written other books, but they're more towards a targeted audience, like in financial services and some endurance athletic books and that type of stuff. But this is my kind of my second book for the general reader, as it were.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always hate asking this question, and just because I feel like, you get it, you've already had it tons of times already. But what was just so the audience knows, what was the motivation behind the book?
Well, the motivation behind this latest book was to try to shed light on, not provide answers, Chris, but try to shed light on the issue of why is it so difficult for us to have hard conversations
Mm.
around the emotional side of trauma? What makes us like, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Like I don't want that person to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to, bring them down and make it about me, or, and there's a million reasons why we just don't know what to say.
Sure.
And that happens even with the closest people that are closest to us. We can talk about, like, how do you go see a doctor? How do you eat healthier? Like all the tasks around, like, this book centers around like 15 people's experience with cancer. But as a doctor, you can wrap your brain around, how do I treat patients? How do I find the best cure? How do I stay up to date on about everything as a patient, as a loved one, a survivor? We can wrap our brains around the tasks. But when it comes to how do you feel about it all, and how are you processing the emotional side of it? I just noticed that there was a huge disconnect. People get really isolated, and they get even they get abandoned, they self-isolate. And I wanted to try to shed light on that topic. So that's what I set out to do with this book.
Yeah, that's because my whole life, I mean, I know that there's been some scenarios where it was one of those things I had no clue what to say, or,
Mm-hmm.
or even people around me. I remember when I was little going to funerals or whatever, just ask my mom, like, what should I do?
Yeah.
How do I handle these situations? And what is that? Is that just part of just the genetics in a person, or is it just the environment they grow up in? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, and I talked to like now probably a couple of thousand people about this topic in depth, and I think we're just wired to not feel comfortable
hmm,
starting really hard conversations. Like it's really, really tough for us to do because there's a million factors going on in the background. And so much easier to like drop off a casserole and leave, or it's so much
sure.
easier to just like go, hey, that person's probably having a hard time. There's probably not a lot I can do anyway. So I'll just check in 3 weeks. And then you realize like 3 months went by and you didn't check in. Now you go, man, I don't want to be an a-hole. So I'm just going to like not check in because, it's been so long that I'm going to be. So there's a host of reasons, but the one universal truth is I guarantee you, there's every person listening, every person that could listen to this, and every person they know. I guarantee you 100% certainty that there's somebody they know, if not multiple people they know, that's going through something really, really painful, really difficult, really traumatic that they know about, let alone that they don't know about, but
Right.
that they know about. And I'll bet you anything that it's really hard to make a phone call so they haven't.
That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
I could think of 3 or 4 people right now that I go,
Yeah.
man, I better call him because I'm
No,
going
I'm
to be
with
a
you.
hypocrite if I don't.
I'm with you. Yeah. As you said that, I was sitting there thinking, I got a few in my head too.
Yeah. And the longer you go not calling them, the kind of like the harder it is to call them. And then
It
that
is.
just adds to the isolation.
It is. And
I
it's
know.
man, that's a good. I mean, this way you put that, I never really thought about it. Just adds, it makes it harder the longer you don't do it, and it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's times, it's one of those things I always say, like you're saying, that I'm going to either call my pops or call whoever, and just I never do it. And I don't know. I think of a million reasons not to do it,
Yeah.
rather than one just to do it. You know?
Yeah. And I mean, look, that's not it's not a judgment. It's just a fact. And so what I wanted to try to do was to shed light on really evocative, inspirational, mind-provoking stories
Sure.
about 15 people. And what I did is I kind of framed the emotional side of the cancer journey, whether they're a doctor or patient, whatever. I tried to frame the emotional journey, like what allowed them to or what didn't allow them to connect with people on a deeper, authentic level in relation to the traumas that they experienced in young adult and adolescence. So that if I could understand a little bit more of what Chris had gone through as a kid that was really traumatic, that he was still living with, that it was still affecting his inside voice, that later on in life, when you're going through something difficult, I might gain some insight into how better connect with you. And when you tell me, look, David, I appreciate the call, but I'm fine. I don't need you.
All right.
Like I'm good. Maybe I have a little more insight into maybe that's true, but maybe it's not true. And if it's not true, I can feel free to press you a little bit, you know, and say, do you not want to talk to me because you're good? Or do you not want to talk to me because you think I'm going to abandon you if you lay this shit on me? Or do you think that I'm not going to care, or I'm going to turn around and make it about me? Because I won't. I'm just asking because I care about you. Like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah. Well, it's almost a defense mechanism too. Do you think? Just because if you call to check on me and I was like, hey, everything's okay, I feel like I might be imposing or bothering
Yeah.
you or taking, yeah. And it's just like, no, just don't worry about me. I'm good. And even though I might be going through a hard time, but
Yeah, because I'll guarantee you that there's times also, and I'm sorry for all the guarantees, but
you could,
I'll guarantee you that there's times when you are going through something difficult, and maybe you had an interaction with a friend, and that friend's like on cloud nine because something great's happening, and
sure.
you go, I'm not going to bring them down, so I won't bring this up, right? There's a million reasons why, and I think at the end of the day, if we're fortunate enough to, at the end of our life, kind of look back on things, we really only have a couple of things that are universal, at least with everybody I spoke to. One thing that's universal is people are proud of and cherish the deep connections that they made with people around them. What kind of impact did I have in others' lives? What kind of impact did they have on me? That they cherish the relationships they had. The
Yeah.
second thing is they regret that they weren't able to form deeper relationships with people they wish they could have, or that those people would have been able to form deeper relationships with them. Oh, I wish I would have learned how to talk to my grandfather. I wish my friend didn't block me out of their life in the time of need. I wish I would have been, there's,
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
it. And
Yeah.
so if that is a universal truth, then how can we best understand what people are going through or what they have gone through so that we can feel more empowered to start those hard conversations. And that's kind of what showing as much. I went deep, Chris, with these people, like deep
Sure.
couple of years, interviewed them. Every single one said at multiple times, all right, we can talk about that, but I never ever talked about it with anybody ever before. And I said, okay, cool. And so they were willing to kind of open book their lives and their traumas and their difficulties in the hopes that you read the book, I read the book, we go, oh, okay, maybe I get a little bit more into the insight into the human condition. Maybe I can bring that with me and add a tool to my belt next time I come into a situation like that.
So going back a little bit, you
Mhm.
take 15 different people and
Mhm.
follow them and interview them and through
Yep.
their cancer story. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I tried to find people who were different ages, different types of cancer,
Okay.
not just a patient, but an oncologist, a medical professional, an executive in the medical world, loved ones, survivors. They had cancer maybe one time. One person in the book only has a fear of cancer, or they lived with cancer, 5 different times their adult life. I wanted people that the cancer was mild, the cancer was, very severe or terminal. And also I wanted, Chris, people that had a wide range of emotional responses to their cancer. And those went from everything from, fear and desperation to acceptance and even gratitude. Because if you can imagine, being told that you got terminal brain cancer and you receiving that news with gratitude. So I needed to have stories that had wide range, and then they had to have evocative traumas in their lives, things that I can, because I can't identify with what it's like to be an oncologist
Right.
and the emotional journey of that. But I can understand what it's like when that oncologist talked about the fact that when she was a child, dad abandoned her, never to be heard from again. Like that, I could wrap my brain around. So now maybe I get a little bit more insight into her life, and maybe it teaches me how to talk to my doctor better.
Yeah. So it's just
You know?
not only cancer, but trauma in general.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm with you now. Okay.
Yeah, we deal with suicide, abandonment, drug addiction, violence, abusive relationships, all those things that limit us from being able to be our true selves, bring that inside voice to the connections,
Yeah.
that we have. So when you ask me, hey David, I'm trying to form a connection with you because you're my friend and I care about you. I'm not leaving a lot inside that I'm not giving you the truth answer. If you really care about me and want to listen, I feel like I got to learn how to open up to you better, how to express myself better. And I think that by examining these people's stories in this depth of a way as we do, that it gives you, some insight. Oh, that's what it's like. That's what people go through. That's why people are wired the way they are. And then you go, okay, maybe I can use that in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think that, depending on if you never been recently learning about micro traumas and actual regular traumas, and that
Mhm.
while reading your book and what these people went through, what you're talking about, it would definitely help a person through all types of trauma actually heal from it. So
Yeah, and
hopefully,
I think there's a secondary goal of helping people heal, which probably is related to that, um, less of a feeling of isolation. We're going through something tough. We go, man, nobody understands me. Nobody knows what the hell I'm going through. But if you see, the true authentic depth of what people are going through, and you can kind of like not compare, but you could feel like, hey, I'm not in this thing alone. It can be a healing thing. But really, without giving people any prescription and without preaching to people at all, this just says like an insight into it. It's like when you watch a documentary about like how a building's built. Like you look at the building and you go, man, I'm seeing it in a whole different way now. You're not going to be able to now go out and build a new building, but at least you could look at it and you go, oh man, like there's so much more that I had no idea about.
yeah.
Right. And that's what I'm hoping to do with the book.
Yeah, and just touching on what you said, that's one thing that I've learned, with having these conversational podcasts or whatever you want to call it, that, a lot of people are going through a lot of things, and some of them feel like they're alone in that, in which they're really not. So a lot of people are kind of there with you or dealing with some type of problem, or if you want to say a micro trauma or a macro trauma, whatever you call it. And that's one thing as far as us reaching out and finding a group and finding others that, oh, I'm not the only one. There's other people who've went down
Mhm.
this road or a certain road, so to speak. And that's, I don't know what the word am I looking for, confiding in a sense, it's almost have a
Yep.
camaraderie. It's just, okay. You feel better that you're not alone in the path.
Yeah, I mean, well said. I don't know what to add to that, but yeah, it does, because it can be a very, very isolating place. There's not a lot of common things between any of the stories, but one common thing is some amount of isolation,
Yeah.
some amount of abandonment. Every single person, like I said just a minute ago, every single person said at some point, well, all right, we can talk about that, but I never really talked about this before with anyone.
Yeah. So,
Like I'll give you an example. You want me to give
okay,
you an
go ahead. Yeah,
example?
yeah, yeah.
So the example is, I'm going to talk about an oncologist.
Okay.
So she'd been an oncologist for 40 years, and I caught her at the right time. And what this is the one that I said her father abandoned the family when
Sure.
she was just a little girl, never to be heard, and still never to be heard from again. So when I sat down and talked to her the first time, I said, hey, doc, Marlene, I said, if we can, go places that we have never gone before, that would be helpful to the reader. And she goes, yeah, sure. And I go, well, things you haven't even like told your friends. She
Mm.
goes, yeah, that's no problem. I don't really talk about these issues with my friends because, we just do what we do. And I'm like, all right, well, your peers, things that you don't confide in other doctors about. She goes, I'm a woman doctor. You think I'm going to tell my peers about my emotional issues?
Oh, wow.
No way. And I said, well, things you haven't talked about with your husband necessarily. And she goes, yeah, there's plenty of things. I met him later in life. And, we don't get into our work that much or the emotional side of it. And so I said, great. I said, well, I'm going to ask you things you never talked to anybody about before. And she said, yeah, let's see what we find out. And I had just caught her at the right time, Chris, when she was dealing with the following. Here's what she was dealing with. She was on a successful and very intelligent and respected oncologist for now 40 years.
Right.
And back when she was young and had her whole life ahead of her, she didn't have the perspective of understanding how much joy she can get out of the world. And when a patient came to her and she said, I think you need to do X, and the patient was like, well, thanks for your opinion, but I'm going to go do Y first, and then I'll come back to you. She was like, all right, whatever. And she went on to the next case. But now, knowing what she knows about how she can treat people, prolong their life, perhaps even save their life, and in relation to the fact that now she has a deep understanding of what life can give to you if you live a deep, meaningful, long life. She's totally desperate to help people. And when somebody says to her, look, I know I appreciate you, that you think we caught this early, but I'm not going to go through your regimen. I'm going to go eat better. I'm going to go see a holistic, person. I'm going to do this or that. The doctor says, now she goes, fine, but don't come back because it's too hard for me. Do not come back. If you're not going to take my advice, don't come back, because I can't stand to walk out of this room where you're telling me you know more than me. And I know you potentially are going to miss out on life. Next door, I got to walk into a room where a lady's got 2 babies bouncing on her legs. She's certain to die from her cancer. There's nothing I can do to help her. I can help you, and you're not letting me. So don't come back. And that emotional the gravity of that emotional trauma on her, that she so desperately wants to help people. So, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
we got really, really deep about a topic that she's never talked to anyone about. And it makes me think. And I remember I was telling that story to someone, and then I followed up with them a couple of days later on another issue. And she said to me, goes, you know what? I went to my doctor. I had a doctor's appointment the other day. She goes, and the doc walked in and said, okay, so how are we doing? And she goes, no, hang on a second. How are you doing? Like, are you having an okay day?
Sure.
And stopped the doctor in her tracks. And the doctor was like, oh, I don't even know how to answer that question. Right. And it's like, cool. Because we don't know what people are going through, even our doctors, even our caregivers.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just that you never know what anybody's going through. And just that, it's one of those things that when you're walking down the hallway, just like you said, when you ask somebody how they're doing, you automatically are supposed to say, oh, fine, great, whatever. But if somebody actually stopped and actually started pouring their problems out on you, nobody would know. I wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just like a tradition, or it's a rule of thumb that you're just, yeah, great, good, moving on. And you just move on about your day. Never think about it. But,
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that, you shouldn't, I don't know if you should just pour your heart out to an open stranger and actually just talk, but, you find somebody you can confide in a little bit. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot better to get it out, is what I've been learning too. Cause I was one of those people who would, had a problem in my life, or, went through some type of, I don't know, whatever. Just, I would just stuff it down inside and just not worry about it and go on. Cause I don't know if that's just what I was taught to do or what, but I just noticed that, growing up and actually being okay to let a couple things out, and, sharing and venting, that I felt a lot better. That, yeah, just like I could actually talk to somebody and I didn't have to, worry about, keeping it inside anymore. And like, what this is the stress alone of what it was doing to eat me alive inside, And it's,
Yeah. And if you're lucky enough to have people in your life that you could get deeper with, have a deeper and more authentic connection, especially in times of trouble, either for you or them, that's great. But sometimes those short little interactions with a stranger sometimes can make the world of difference.
really,
And, I remember, so part of the book, I did a 5,000-mile bike ride where I visited each one of the book participants for the first time. I knew a couple of them, but most of them I didn't know. And I zigzagged my way across the country on a bike to go meet them for the first time. And I met a ton of people every day along the way because I was visiting hospitals and talking to strangers or whatever. And some of the couple of minute interactions that I have with people will never leave me. They're some of the deepest, most meaningful connections I've ever had. And so, it was a matter of us both being present, listening, being silent, being, caring and connecting in a really deep, authentic way. And those are very healing, therapeutic discussions that I look back on with some of the fondest memories ever. Some of the briefest encounters have been some of the things that have really touched me the deepest.
yeah. No, and I hope I don't forget this thought, but I wanted to ask you about that 5,000-mile bike ride. But
Mhm.
yeah, no, I agree though that, it seems that, as far as a human species or civilization, whichever you wanted to say or call it, that we do want that human connection. That's one thing we've always strived for throughout history, is just being in that type of tribe and having somebody, we can connect with. And, there's people out there who say, oh, I just want to be alone and live in a log cabin. And yeah, maybe that's true to a certain point. I feel like there are outliers to everything, but I think for the most part, people do need some type of connection. And I think some of us actually started to learn that, during the pandemic or COVID or whatever you want to say, just, being locked up by yourself, not being able to get out. And luckily for technology and stuff, we were like, you and I are able to have this conversation today. Yeah. But people felt the need, like, oh, wait, the world came to a halt. I can't go out and see my friends anymore. And I want to have a connection of some sort. And as you've been talking, that, and I might be ranting a little bit now, but I was thinking about people, from childhood to teenagers to adult life, I can pick out a few key people who have made some type of impact on my life, and they're imprinted on my brain. And whether it's a good memory or bad memory, but most of them are pretty good, like a teacher or a doctor that you saw, like you're saying, a friend that, you haven't touched base with, but you remember, some good times with them growing up. And it's all good stuff. And it's all about that human connection, what you're talking about. But
yeah. And also a connection to yourself, because that's one of the things that came out of the pandemic, right? People living with themselves and connecting with themselves a little bit better. Like, how do I be a better friend? What things are important to me? Am I living my life on purpose? Am I making good choices? Is this what I really want to be doing? Are these the people who I want to really know? And then how many people did you reconnect with during that time? And how many people kind of went a little bit by the wayside? Because we learned a truer sense of ourselves. And I think it allows people to be more authentic and bring them. So I know now, I think I pay a little bit more attention to the fact when somebody asks me a question along the lines of how are you or what's going on or whatever, I kind of know, or I think I know a little bit better when they're really present and really are authentically and with care making the question. And I certainly don't walk by somebody and say, hey, how's it going? And keep walking. Because if I'm not going to stick around and have them give me the answer, I'm not asking the question. Right.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. But you get just reading somebody's body language. I mean, day to day is just one thing that I've learned, that, the way they're holding themselves, are they walking with their shoulders back? Are they just walking? Something you can easily tell, like, what somebody's going through. And even if you just said, hey, how you doing? That usually, some people like that, just to know that somebody did ask. And even if you didn't have a conversation, and, it seems like that life is full of momentum, and it's always, oh, I was too busy to stop and talk. But if you could at least, like you said, stop and talk for a few minutes and just say, what's up? What's going on? How you feeling?
It's hard to do. It's hard. It's kind of sometimes easier to do with a stranger, but it's hard to do, especially when it's around something difficult.
Sure.
You lost a family member, your pet died. You lost your job that you were just bragging about 2 weeks ago. I mean, there's a lot of different kind of traumas we go through. Right. And, if you happen to be around someone who's going through something, or you're going through something, and somebody else happens to be there for you, how can we feel a little bit better about engaging in that hard conversation?
And just kind of switching gears a little bit, I just didn't want to lose this thought, but I wanted to ask you about that 5,000 mile bike ride that you talked about. What was that like, and what were you thinking? And, why did you decide to, I know you're an endurance athlete, but so was that just something, hey, I'm going to go just ride my bike and visit all these people? And we went to California to Florida, then New York. And
it kind of started out a little bit as a gimmick, right? Because, I went from like overweight smoker in my late 30s. Yeah. In my late 30s, I was an overweight smoker, never did anything athletic, totally stressed out of my life, like not living anything what an athletic, on purpose, healthy kind of person does.
Yeah.
And I kind of dove headfirst into endurance athletics. And since then I've done, like 12.5 Ironmans, and I've done 50-mile runs and 100-mile runs, and you name it, just all this crazy stuff.
That's 24-hour runs for an overweight smoker to dive into endurance athletes.
I know.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't go from point A to B like that. There was a stretch.
Okay. I was going to say, man, that's really badass of you if you did it like that. But
Well, what I did was I put down the cigarettes. Then the next day I went for a 2-minute run, couldn't make it.
Right.
And then about a week later, did a mile. And then I said, well, shoot, if I could do a mile, maybe I could do three, do a 5K. And it was a way to continue to not smoke.
That's the
And
way to do
also,
it.
and then 3 or 4 months later, I did my first triathlon. Then I did a half Ironman. And by my 8th or 9th month into it, I did my first Ironman. And then I said, all right, well, let's just see, man. Let's keep going, see what you can do. So here I am 20 years later, and I've done, I don't even know, a couple hundred events,
Yes,
something like
that's
that.
what I read.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So for the bike ride, I thought that humans are really connected only by, I think really, I mean, we're all connected, but I break it down to two things we're connected by.
Okay.
One is story.
Sure. I agree.
I never met a person yet that if they had a minute to listen and you said, dude, I got this story, you got to hear it. We all lean in. We all want to hear a good story. So we're connected by story. And two is we all have the same basic human emotions. We might have different emotional responses, but we have the same basic human emotions, fear, happiness, joy, those kind of things.
I agree.
So if we're connected by story, and I want to talk about the emotional journeys of trauma through storytelling, I need to connect people. So I said, how do we connect the people? Oh, well, like I'll just ride my bike. And like one of those old timey movies where the red line follows the plane where it goes or whatever.
Yeah.
Now I could go, oh, well, I'm going to connect the stories. So it was just another way to add another facet of connectivity. And then I said, well, can you do this? Like, can you bike that far? And I zigzagged it on a map. And I was like, yeah, I guess I could. And then I said, okay, how long can you do it in? And I ended up doing it in only 6 weeks because that's as much time as I could give to it. And it was tough, man. I was doing
Doubt it.
12, 14, 16 hours a day to get from point to point. And it was day after day after day. It's absolutely brutal physically, but it was fantastic emotionally.
So all your life, up until you said you were in your 30s, where you just didn't care about being in shape or athletics, or did you have a turning point in your life in your 30s where you just said, hey, I got to do something?
Yeah, I didn't care much about myself.
Ah,
Yeah, that's what I would say. I didn't care much about myself. So I was way too worried about surviving and way too worried about what you might think of me or what the boss might think of me or
and that.
what other people might think of me. And I never, like I saw the guy in the mirror, but I never really saw the guy in the mirror.
Yeah.
And one day I just had a number of things happen to me in a very short period of time. One is I kind of realized, oh crap, I'm in a marriage with an abusive alcoholic. This is not a place where I could be. And I got 2 young kids, I got 4-year-old twins. And I go, dude, what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah.
So I had that realization hit me. Then I had another realization hit me. My sister called me up and said, hey, I got terminal brain cancer. And, we got to talk about how, this is going to lead to my death. And she had a young family and everything. It was real tragic. And then at the same time, in that same time period, I kept going to this one friend and complaining to him over and over and over about all the bad things in my life. And he finally stopped and he goes, dude, stop. Like literally, you're the problem. And I go, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, what the hell, man? All you do is ever complain about the problems you're in. You got yourself in all those problems. He goes, you, every time you see a rabid dog, you go pet it and then it bites you and you get all, butt hurt that it bit you. And he goes, stop petting rabid dogs, dude. Fix your own problems.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, hell, that makes sense. And I went, oh, so it's not that I never paid attention to that stuff. I never was even remotely aware that I should care about myself first. And I don't mean being a narcissist or being self-centered. I'm talking about like, that old adage, put your own mask on first and then
Sure.
put on your kid. I get that now. I'm probably a slow learner, but how are you going to be your best self if you're not being your best self for you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree 100% with that. I mean, I've always heard the same thing. You kind of always got to make yourself happy before you can make everybody else happy. And it's one of those things that, if you're sick and it's in a sense, and if you don't really understand, what the problem is, but it's just so easy to play the victim on everything, and especially in today's times, and it's always a billion reasons to blame other people rather than take, ownership in yourself. Jocko Willink talks about this and that.
Yep.
there's extreme ownership and there's problems. Hey man, look in the mirror and, see what you're doing first rather than blaming the first person you see, like you just said.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I finally decided to, after reading that book, it's just, hey man, if you fuck up in life, just own it. It happens, we're human.
And or if you want to do something, own it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, plenty of times we all messed up, and you go, okay, whatever. But don't be a victim, and don't get a chip on your shoulder, and don't be cynical or whatever.
Sure,
I get that,
sure.
but I think more often than not that we just don't push ourselves to the level we should because we're self-conscious, because we're worried about what other people think,
Exactly.
and frankly, nobody gives a crap. I mean, honestly, nobody gives a crap, and that's a good thing. So let me tell you a quick story. I was the very first half Ironman that I did. Okay. It was in July. I quit smoking the beginning of February. So what's that? Like 5 months after quit smoking. I was still overweight. I was definitely not an athlete, nothing like that. So I drive up to Northern California. I'm in Southern California at the time. I drive up to Northern California, and I wake up the next day to go do the race, but I got all this nervous energy. And it's one of those wave starts where they set off like 200 people at a time, like 10 different times, right? Because So I walk up to the start line, like all nervous, and everyone I see, Chris, is like freaking Greek gods. Like they're like chiseled out of stone, and they're walking around like they own the world. And I'm like, they all got this expensive gear, and they look, and I'm like, what the hell am I even doing here?
Yep.
Like everybody's gonna look at me like a fraud. I certainly don't. I'm not an athlete like any of these people. What the hell? What am I even doing here? Like literally, get in your car and go home, dude, because you're a total loser. You don't belong here. And that's an analogy for a million times in my life, or a million times that I could see that could have happened. But it's a real life thing. So I almost get ready to turn around and go home because I'm a big fraud. Everybody's looking at me like an idiot.
Right.
And then the gun goes off. And one dude, Chris, flips on his back and he starts duck paddling. And the next guy is doing circles. I mean, there's some real athletes that take off and swim. But one guy starts walking in the river because he doesn't know how to swim. And I'm like, seriously, man? Like these guys, they don't care what anybody thinks. They're just out there doing what they do.
Awesome.
And I go, well, maybe I shouldn't worry like what anybody thinks. What do you think, dude? Go out there and try your best and just go do the thing and don't worry about anybody else because they don't care anyway. Nobody's watching.
Exactly, man.
I'm like, that's so empowering.
Oh, it is, and I agree that, I'm one of these CrossFit guys, and, when it's like, I call it imposter syndrome. And I guess most people do, even in I've been doing it 8+ years now. And even when I do my competitions now, even right when the first workout's ready to begin, it's still coming over me like, man, why are you doing this? Why are you here? Right. But then once I finally, I got this from Mike Tyson, that once you finally, we have a 10-second clock that goes off, and you start your workout or whatever it is. But once that clock hits, like I try to flip my switch now. And like Mike Tyson used to say, once he got to the ring, like he would start calling himself a god, and that everything's going to be. He kind of talked about it too on a podcast. It was like, wow, Mike Tyson was, worried about walking into that ring. He's one of the baddest dudes on the planet. And but now what he does, he just gets in and gets this whole new mentality. And I guess my point is that the reason I was bringing up the bike and stuff that, I signed up for my first half marathon here, and it's coming up in September. And this is something that I knew it would challenge me. And even when I first signed up for it, that I'm getting these thoughts right now. It's like, man, what are you doing, dude? I'm 5'7", I don't have a runner's body at all. I'm 170 pounds. And it's like, what are you doing? But, I firmly believe about challenging yourself and doing hard things. And that makes you get you out of your comfort zone, and you grow a little bit by learning about it. But, and I've been going through a program right now, getting my miles in each week, and I'm enjoying it and I'm loving it. And it's one of those things that somebody said the same thing that you just said, that, dude, just go out there and do your best. Don't worry about, if you're going to be number one or last, whatever, just go out there and have a good time and enjoy yourself. It's your first run. Just do it. It's okay.
And I guarantee you, if you told one of your, like 5 of your closest friends what you're going to do, I guarantee not one of them would say, oh, were you the shortest guy there? Were you the tallest guy there?
That's exactly what happened when we told a group of friends.
Nobody will ask, right? Maybe those friends, but nobody's going to ask, like, what was your finishing time? Nobody's going to say, like, oh, did you have any problems, with eating? Nobody's going to say, anything. They're going to be like, dude, you did that thing? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's funny how we think people care and that they're paying attention. They're not. They're just living their lives. Yeah. And so we might as well live ours. And so that kind of inspired me to delve really deep into endurance athletics because I said, oh, well, if you need to find out what you're capable of and nobody else is watching, nobody else cares, well, let's just go find it, go figure it out. Why not go do 3 Ironmans this year?
Why not?
Right?
Yeah.
Why not? I'm
Yeah.
never going to win them. I'm not winning.
Okay.
I'm not looking, right? Nobody's watching me. Nobody's counting on me to win.
Right.
So that's fine. Let's just see what I can do.
Yeah,
Can
you're
I
just
bike
doing it for you.
across the country? I could do it. Sure. Why not?
Awesome. You're doing it for you. You're doing it for your health. It's something you enjoy doing, I'm assuming. So why not? I mean, it's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I started this podcast. It was something I felt like I needed to do. And, I did it for me, and it was, again, it was one of those challenges for me, like we were talking about hard conversations and I've never felt like I was a great conversation. So it was something that even during the pandemic, I learned that, man, I want to do something. I want to put myself out there. I want to try. I want to learn. I want to grow a little bit. And now I get to, some magic has happened, and now I get to talk with badass people like yourself. And,
Right.
and
Well, it's really cool, and you are a good interview, by the way. But look, it doesn't matter if you end up being the #1 podcast globally in the world. I'll tell you what for sure is you have way more listeners than the person that thought about doing a podcast and never
exactly,
took the leap. You got
exactly,
way more listeners than them.
exactly. That's a good point.
You know.
Yeah. And even that's, and that, even just putting that into a perspective, like a triathlon thing. I mean, at least you're doing something, and that you're getting more miles or whatever into no person just sitting on their couch watching Netflix the whole time. So yeah. And it's one of these things. If you feel like you should go do 3 triathlons or however many you did in a year, why not? I mean, just, prepare somewhat for it, study this, but go in there and have a good time and learn about it and learn about yourself, and you'll enjoy the journey it takes you on, I hope. So it's like, that's what it's done for you, and when you did this 5,000-mile bike, were you by yourself the whole time?
I was by myself about a third of the time,
Okay.
like self-supporting, carrying all my gear and being 100% on my own from
Cool.
24/7. But the other 2/3, I had my now wife, Erin. She was my fiance at the time. She was there. She flew back and forth from LA a couple of times to hang with me for a couple of weeks at a time. I had friends that were there, but it was mostly her. But I did the bike solo. I think I did 4,700 miles, and I would say I had people with me biking, maybe 300 of those miles.
Sure.
So I did them mostly by myself, but I did have support because, boy, carrying all my gear and all the logistics of everything,
That's
I
awesome.
couldn't. There's no possible way. I tried to go out and do it alone, but when I got closer to the start date, I said, "Geez, there's no way I can do this alone. So I'm going to need some help."
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, what is it? You can go far by yourself, but if you want to go farther, get a team of people, or
Yeah,
whatever that saying is.
yeah.
I mean, when you were biking, I mean, did you have music? Was there something you were thinking about? I mean, were you thinking about
Well,
the people, or
I got some PTSD because I had to get from point A to point B each day.
sure?
And the fastest way when you're biking from point A to point B is on the highway. So I was on highways most of that 4,700 miles,
Wow.
which if you ever been on the highway while trucks, 16-ton trucks are going friggin', 75 miles an hour, 3 feet from you, it's very traumatic. So I spent 12, 14, even 16, 17 hours a day on a highway with just countless close calls and freaking people honking and hearing, people hit the drunk bumps, wondering if they're going to continue to hit you. So I did wear headphones, which drowned out a good part of the noise.
Sure.
And I listened to podcasts. I listen to music. I certainly thought about the stories because I had interviewed everybody up until that time, and so I knew them really well. But I hadn't wrote the stories yet, and I really needed them to marinate. And one of the joys, and I don't think I don't want to assume this, but I don't think the same thing happens with CrossFit because it's so explosive. But one of the joys of endurance athletics is it's not explosive. It's very kind of like slow moving. Even if it's steady, it's not explosive in nature. I don't have to focus on it. I can just do it in the background, and it's very contemplative space, very meditative space. So I solve a lot of problems. I discover a lot of things. I can be more observant as I'm steadily biking and running in the background.
Yeah, no, it's a great point because that's what I've been learning. As far as CrossFit, you're like you said, you're very explosive. You only either have like 13 minutes, sometimes 20, sometimes 30 minutes.
Right.
But still, in that time, you're usually concentrating on your heart rate, your form, you're just
Yep.
what are you doing next? How are you going to break up the reps or something like that? But with running, like the farthest I'd run in CrossFit was a 5K, 3 miles. Yeah. So, that's,
Hmm.
I could give you that all day, but now, with my programming, I'm up to 6 miles and I'll be up to 7 this weekend. And,
Yep.
and it's exactly what you said. That was a great way to put it. It's meditating or
Yep.
meditative that, I've done the same thing. I've bounced between music and podcasts, but I just noticed that, I'm with myself and I just can go at my pace and I can just, I think a lot of things out through like what they're saying in the podcast or whatever, or even when the music, thinking about what I got going on today.
It's a whole different level, man. It's really cool. Let me tell you a quick story.
Go ahead.
One of the very first 50-mile runs that I ever did was in Vegas. It was the last weekend of June. They call it running from the devil. They don't do it anymore because it's too freaking dangerous, but because it's hot here. Like
Sure.
I think it was 121 that day. So I get to the start line 15 minutes late because I didn't wake up on time, and I'm there alone. I drive there, I get there, and so I'm running to the start line, and everybody's already taken off. And then the first quarter mile is really steep to get from the parking lot to the main road. And I turned the corner, and they had a little temperature gauge. It was 91 degrees already at 6:15 in the morning. And I started cursing myself. I'm like, seriously, dude? I mean, uphill when it first starts at 91 degrees, you got to catch it. And I started like complaining. And then I said, dude, why don't you like check yourself? Like, nobody's paying you. Nobody signed you up for this race. You did it on your own. You need to change your perspective. And I said, perspective. Oh, and I contemplated the word perspective, Chris, and I thought, well, is like change your perspective, like in a movie when they shoot a movie, from which angle? Change your perspective, like as a writer, like first person, third person, and how do you gain perspective? What is perspective? And I literally pondered every facet of the word perspective until I hit the turnaround at mile 25, and I'm like, holy crap, dude, you've been thinking about the word perspective for 25 miles.
Sure.
Like nearly 5 hours of running, because you got to run slower in the heat. Nearly 5 hours of running. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Awesome.
So yeah, it can be a deeply meditative space doing endurance athletics.
And I have a couple of friends who do, more endurance athletics than I do, right? But, is that part of the runner's high, or have you ever experienced a runner's high?
Only one time did I ever experience runner's high.
What was that like?
It was stupid, dude. It was completely stupid. I was doing a 50-mile run on a place called Catalina Island, which is this really rugged island off the coast of California.
Okay.
Used to be owned by the Wrigley family. And like 99% of the island is a conservatory. They used to shoot movies there. It's a real famous place. But I'm doing this run, and it's one of my first long distance runs. And you could see California, the mainland it's only about 20 odd miles away, and I could see it, and I'm listening to my music, and I'm feeling so freaking good, and I'm running down this hill, and what's that Ice Cube song? You better chickadee check yourself before you wreck yourself. And I'm singing the song, going chickadee check yourself. And I'm listening to this, and I'm literally running. And I look down at my watch, and I go, all right, cool. I'm moving. If this, and I'm looking at the mainland, Chris, and I go, if I was on the mainland, I literally could run from California to New York because I feel so good. And then it hit me that my watch said I was running like 730 miles. I am not an athlete, dude. I cannot run 730 miles, and certainly not a few miles into a 50-mile run. I was needing to chickadee check myself before I wrecked myself. And I started laughing, and I'm like, dude, there's no way that you just did that. That was total runner's high, man. What the hell were you thinking you could run from here to New York? That's the stupidest thing ever.
No, I love it, dude. That's awesome. Yeah. I've had a couple of friends tell me I'd be, getting the runner's high in no time. And just, I've been trying to, I don't know if I'm too conscientious of it right now because I keep looking forward or waiting for it to happen, but I haven't had anything like that to happen yet.
Yeah, I don't really think it is. I think a runner's high is like an endorphin based thing. Like you're feeling like this, like all of a sudden things are clicking for you, whatever. I'm not sure if that's what it is. I probably have run 25,000 miles of,
Wow.
or something like that. I think I've had it one time.
Okay. Okay. It makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it's, I don't know if it's just too much media that I've looked at, but it's just like, do you get it every time you run, or is it just, is it just happens naturally? But, one time if 25,000 miles, I mean,
but I will tell you, it's probably not unlike training for your CrossFit competitions. It's a rare time that you leave very rare time that you leave a workout going, I kind of hate myself. I wish I didn't do that. Right. It's a very rare time that you do that. Most of the time, even if you really didn't want to go do it, when you're done, you're like, oh, hell yeah.
That was my point. I was getting ready to say. That's usually what it is for me. I get off work. It's like, damn, I don't want to go down there today.
Yep.
I know if I go down there and get through it, I'll feel so much better,
Right.
And
so if to the extent that there's a runner's high, for me, the runner's high is I know no matter how much I sometimes don't want to go running, I never come home from a run saying that was a waste of time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point because like I said, I ran 5 or 3 miles before getting onto this program or whatever. But the first time, I had to run 4 miles. I was like, shit, man, I don't want to go do this. Right. Like this is like, what's this going to be like? It's going to hurt. And right now I've been keeping, I guess a 9-minute pace per mile. But somebody just, again, they put it like this, like you just run for 9 more minutes. It's just 1 more mile. And then,
you do almost anything for 9 minutes.
Exactly, man. And ever since that mentality has got in my head, just 1 more, it's what's 1 more. Right. And now it's making more sense to me. It's the same. I'm just going for a run. Like, just don't worry about being competitive. Just go for a run and just chill.
Yeah. And eventually you're going to get to the point, if you have the time and the desire to do this, like when I'm doing a 50-mile run or an Ironman or something, I'll be like, okay, you only got 10 miles to go. You can run 10 miles in your sleep.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who are you even that you just said that? Right. Because you're not the guy that can run 10 miles in his sleep. You're this big, fat, overweight smoker. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not that guy anymore. But, it's funny the way our mind plays tricks on us.
Yeah. It's our mind is like due to, it's survival mode. It goes into like, hey, you probably shouldn't do this because you're probably not going to.
Right.
Yeah, probably live or whatever. It's going to be hard or whatever. But that's when you got to dig down in there and conquer your inner, whatever you want to call it. And it's like in demons, it's like, no, we're going to do this.
And I did that almost every day on that 5,000-mile bike ride, because I would get in at anywhere between 8 or 9 at night and maybe midnight, 1 a.m. I'd have to find dinner, get checked in, shower, stomp on my clothes to clean them, hang them up so they would dry the next day, and then get to sleep so I can get on the road by 7 a.m.
Sure.
Right. And sometimes, man, I did not want to get up. Right. But then I said, you have to, you have to get from point A to point B today. Otherwise you're screwed. So figure out a way to do it. You just do it.
If you were ever to go back in time and like your younger self and thought to yourself, hey, in 20, 30, 40 years from now, you're going to be running triathlons and Ironman and writing books. Would you ever believe that yourself if somebody would have told you that back?
No way. No way possible. No way. Yeah, no way. Because I didn't. I mean, self-perception is a big deal, right? How we perceive ourselves is a big deal. And I always perceive myself as somebody who was very empathetic, good listener, very observant, very sensitive. But I didn't even have an awareness of who I was or what I wanted to get out of this world. I just didn't. And once I developed that sense of, why don't you learn who you are and what you're capable of and what you want to do? Why don't you lean into that person and learn about it? I was just like, man, if I could have learned that when I was younger, oh my God, that would have been so smart. It would have been so great.
Here's a good question, or it's a good question in my head. Is this what gives you hope, or what you hope the world gives hope, from having these deep interactions with those 15 people in your book and learning, even for your own self, you could change, yourself. If you don't like the way your world's going or your life journey, you can just make a decision one day and just say, hey, I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to I'm going to lose some pounds. Is that what, you have Hope
Yeah.
people hope for the world.
I think so. And there's not any of these stories. Some of them are tragic, some of them are very emotional, but the stories are, every single one of them is super inspirational and can be a great learning exercise. Like, for example, I led the book with Bobby's story, and Bobby's story, real quick, is this guy who was not unlike a lot of people I know. I might have even had some qualities of Bobby. Not very likable, kind of angry at the world, little chip on his shoulder, made a lot of bad decisions, but ended up blaming other people for him, bad relationships and bad career turns. Everything happens to him because, he's the bad, he's the receiver of bad luck or whatever. Then, and then all of a sudden he meets this person who gets to put a new, as he says, gets to put a new pair of glasses on him. So he sees the world a whole different way, and he realizes, holy cow, man, like, I've been the problem my whole life. This is a woman that is showing me how I could learn how to be my best self, and I could learn how to love myself and
Yeah.
love somebody else. And it was this beautiful story, right? Shortly after they met, she got cancer. They beat it. They got married. Shortly before they got married, the cancer came back, and shortly after they were married, it took her. And it
Mm.
was really, really, really tragic. But during that time, Chris, they got this opportunity to go super deep into every possible corner of the emotional map that two people could go through. And one of the things that she said was, look, this sucks that I'm not going to be able to be around to see it, but you are now your best self, and you need to learn how to love and be loved with somebody else, because I'm not going to be the one here, and you certainly can't waste all of my hard work. So he promised to go to therapy after,
Sure.
and then he decided that I'm going to live up to the promise that I made to her. And he's now happily married, been married for like 12 years to the person he fell in love with. And he's very grateful for what he went through with Brandy. And they do an event every year in her honor. And it's really this beautiful story. But I asked him one time, Chris, to your point, I asked him, I go, dude, like what the hell? How are you able to do that? And
Yeah.
he goes, look, David, he goes, if Brandy didn't get cancer and die, he didn't have kids, right? But
All right.
if Brandy didn't die, her and I would still be married. We'd have a big family with a lot of kids, and I'd be living my best life ever. I couldn't even imagine having a better life if she had lived. That didn't happen. He goes, who I'm married to now, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I'm as happy as a person could be. I'm as deeply in love as a person could be. I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Of course, things would have been different, but they didn't work out that way. They worked out this way, and I wouldn't change it for a second. And I'm like, oh, damn, if you can't learn from that, dude, you cannot learn. Right. And
No,
so each one of the stories has some kind of an element of what can we learn from what others have gone through or what they're going through. And it's very reassuring that we can become our best selves for sure.
yeah. That's very reassuring to me, especially, and
Mhm.
when some people will tell you that, the world's such a toxic place, and that, when it's one of the worst times to be alive. But, I think it's just a matter of what your outlook on life is and what your experience has been. I mean, kind of what we were talking about earlier, there's people out there who only want to look at all negative things in life, and that's just what their brain goes to automatically, whether, you know, you talking to them in the morning, night, or evening, or whatever you want to say, but just it's always negative. It's just a toxic person. And then if you just like, hey, the world can be anything you want it to be. And that's one of my
Yeah.
personal beliefs that, and even for you, if you don't, you take what the cards you've been dealt with, and make the best out of it, just like, Bobby, and learn.
Mhm. Yeah, if you want to, like I said to you before, I'm not preachy or prescriptive, but if I could be preachy for 1 second, I didn't learn that till actually till I was on the bike ride. So I'm in my 50s, and I didn't learn the depth of that because I carried around some things as a burden and
Yeah.
some things
I'm with you.
as cynical. I have a I have a mom that didn't want kids and haven't talked to her in decades. She hadn't talked to me actually in decades. Um, I have other things that are problems in my life that will never get solved. Like, I'll
Sure.
never be able to wrap my brain around the bad people that have done bad things that are just bad people. And you just got to accept the fact that sometimes life ain't perfect.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't learn the depth of that until I was on the bike ride. And I'm trying to reconcile some of these heavier issues like we just talked about, like, why are there so many bad people? Or why do you have a mom that hates her kids? Or why did you have a dad that didn't have kids till he was 60 and he knew he was going to die when you were young? So what the hell was he thinking? And I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. And then I came up with this analogy in my head. I don't know if I stole it from someone, but I think I came up with it, that, you know what, when the dude made my puzzle, the puzzle of David, and it was 10,000 pieces, right? That's a lot of pieces of puzzle to put together. And I kind of got like 6,000 pieces in, and I realized, oh shit, the box is missing a few pieces, right? So I can either stop putting it together, or I can continue to put it together and just accept the fact that, oh, well, it's going to have missing pieces. Like sometimes the box misses some pieces. Sometimes there's bad people and there's no explanation for it. Just let it go. So I kind of look at myself as a person who before would concentrate on the missing pieces, and now I concentrate on the 9,995 pieces that go together. Because you know what? We all got missing pieces. It's just life sucks sometimes. What are you gonna do?
I agree 100%. And yeah, just to touch on that, just that, you finally, would you say you made a decision in your 50s that you decided, hey, this is how, you just didn't hold on to it. You just worked it out yourself. And it's one thing that, you can do it anything you want to do. I firmly believe anytime you want, it's just a matter of when you want to do it.
Yeah.
It's when you want to make the change. And, and David, I think, we're getting kind of short on time, and I think we should get home right there on that. I think it's a beautiful way to end this. And so, and I'm glad there's people out there like yourself doing this kind of work and writing books and doing big things. But if people want to find you, if they want to find the Cycle of Lives or anything you want to plug or all that stuff, feel free to do it.
Well, I appreciate that, Chris. Thank you. The book, the Cycle of Lives book, it's wherever books are sold. Inside the book in the back, and also on my website at cycleoflives.org, I list the charities that all are receiving the net proceeds from the book. So whether it's sold on Amazon or with an Audible or directly with me, signed copies, whatever, speaking events or whatever, 100% of the proceeds goes towards those organizations that were chosen by the book participants. So that's a cool thing.
Yes,
if you want to find out anything about me or other books or other things, I do expressive writing workshops. I do a lot of public speaking. So they can find me on the web at cycleoflives.org.
Cool. David, you're a badass dude, man. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. You're going to be badass too. And after you, I mean, CrossFit is not badass enough. You got to go run long. So after you go run long, you'll be badass yourself.
I feel like it's going to, right now, it's short term right now, but I'm getting the bug. I'm drinking the juice of it, man. So
I will not be drinking your juice of CrossFit, dude. That's way too hard for me. Yeah. That is way too hard for me.
Well, cool, man. Well, thanks for doing this again, man. I appreciate you. So
thanks, Chris.
We're out of here. Bye, folks.